There's something that the crypto space may not realize. It's something subtle, it's not very obvious. It's that running a truly decentralized proof of stake blockchain takes a lot of preparation and practice. There are levels to this thing. An ecosystem might be able to run a proof of stake blockchain, but to be able to run a truly decentralized one that doesn't stumble when it's attacked, that doesn't suffer reorgs, that doesn't have to be turned off and on again, that's a different level. That requires a lot of preparation and a lot of reps, a lot of practice. Right now, among the big blockchains, Cardano can make that claim, but it's become unclear if even our biggest competitor is going to be at that level. Ready? Let's go. Today, we are going to discuss the ETH beacon chain suffering an unfortunate setback, a replacement for DB Sync going live, World Mobile beginning to advertise Airnodes in a new way, and you know what time it is. Last Thursday of the month, something important happens today. If your idea of a fun Thursday night is practicing fencing in front of a giant black fireplace and chandelier, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Well, guys, look what we find today. I think running a truly decentralized proof of stake blockchain is a little bit like driving. If you've never driven, if you've only studied driving in textbooks, if you've had theoretical scenario based discussions about driving, it doesn't matter if you're holding high level thought salons about driving and you're bringing in intellectuals who are on the cutting edge of thinking about driving. Even if you've played video games about driving, if you've never actually driven an automobile, the first time you get behind the wheel and you're like in traffic in rush hour, it's a different experience. It's an experience you never had before. And you might be a naturally good driver. I'm not sure if those exist. Maybe they do, but you might be good at driving for some reason, or you might be bad. And you don't really know until you actually do it. My experience is that most people are pretty bad at driving the first time they get behind the wheel. If they've never actually been behind the wheel before, they're usually pretty bad at driving, pretty jerky, like a gradual application of the brakes and the accelerator is a thing, operating the steering wheel and the accelerator and the brake and, sometimes manual transmission and a clutch. Doing all these things simultaneously is kind of a unique experience, and I'm not saying that's the future of driving. I'm not saying that's the best way to drive, like we won't ever have better controls, but that's the way most of the driving in the world happens today. And even if you've driven, but you've only driven in, say, an empty parking lot, or at 3 a.m. when there's no cars on the road, or you've only driven in very rural areas where there are absolutely no cars. The second you're in a real big city and it's rush hour and people are like honking and everybody's driving super aggressively, if you haven't ever done that before, you've got to do it before you've got any experience in it. Before you're actually good at it, you've really got to do it. It's very difficult to sort of intellectualize your way into it. You've kind of got to do the thing before you find the areas that you're bad, the areas where you need to improve. And then the actual experience shows you what you need to fix. I think some blockchains might experience this. We've got a bunch of blockchains right now that are proof of stake and they call themselves decentralized. But some of those chains are kind of like the empty parking lot driver. They can say, yeah, I've driven a car. Hey, have you driven a car? Yeah, I've driven a car. But where have you driven a car? An empty parking lot with no obstacles. Yeah, that's driving a car. but it's not the same. It's not the same as driving in a busy city with lots of other drivers aggressively trying to get to their destination. These are two different activities. And until you've done the second thing, you don't really have any experience at doing the second thing. You don't even know what you're bad at when you do that second thing until you actually do it. Some other chains might be like the rural driver. And some of those rural drivers, to their credit, they might say, hey, I don't even like the city. I'm never going to go to the city. I'm going to be driving on open roads my whole life. So who knows if I'm good at driving in the city? Who knows what flaws that would reveal in my urban driving abilities, but I don't care because I'm never going to drive in the city. Maybe some chains are like that. Maybe some chains are like, hey, we're a proof of stake blockchain. We're not decentralized. We're never going to be decentralized. And that's okay. That's not the game that I think we in Cardano are in. We're in the decentralized proof of stake smart contract blockchain race. That's the game we're playing here. Some other chains, maybe they're not playing that game. Maybe they're playing the smart contract blockchain game, but not the decentralized one. That's fine. They're like the rural driver who will, maybe never come to the city. They're never going to venture into an urban area that is dense with aggressive drivers. They're never going to go there. They're going to drive on nice, safe country roads. There's a lot less going on. They're going to stay out there in the countryside. That's fine. They can do their thing. But we've also got some of these parking lot drivers. They're driving in an empty parking lot when the store is closed. No obstacles, also no drivers, much like the countryside driver. But this is going to be an empty parking lot in the city. So if you ask them, hey, are you a city driver? They're going to say yes, because they've driven in the empty parking lot. We're experiencing a lot of that now. Then there's this other category. There's another category of big, gigantic blockchains. In this case, the second biggest blockchain in the entire crypto space that is obviously trying to become one of those super serious big city urban drivers. But so far, they've only driven in the empty parking lot. And they're starting to discover, as they inch closer and closer to actually having to drive out on the open roads, they're discovering that maybe the empty parking lot wasn't the perfect simulation of big city driving. It's sort of like they've been driving in the empty parking lot all along, and as they get closer to that date, that projected date that they might push back once again, as they get closer to that projected date where they know they're expected to be out driving on the open road, they've been trying to drive in the parking lot with a few more cars in there. And as they try to drive in the parking lot at busier and busier times, when there's a few more cars just kind of driving at low speed in the parking lot, they've noticed that they occasionally hit some cars. And while they could adopt that Days of Thunder rubbing his racing kind of attitude, instead, they're like, man, we're kind of hitting cars here, even at low speed. Maybe this is going to be a problem when we get out on the open road. Maybe we don't actually have as much practice at this decentralized proof of stake smart contract blockchain thing as we think we do. Here, Martin Koppelman points out to us that the Ethereum beacon chain experienced a 7-block deep reorg 2.5 hours ago. So the beacon chain is the current proof of stake version of Ethereum. When the merge happens and the main chain and the beacon chain merge, then we'll get Ethereum 2.0 and all of Ethereum will be proof of stake. But right now, the beacon chain is their sort of transition test, arm of Ethereum that's already in proof of stake. He says this shows that the current attestation strategy of nodes should be reconsidered to hopefully result in a more stable chain! Proposals already exist. So you can see Martin Koppelman is not saying, hey, Rubbin is racing. Let's go fast and break things. Don't worry about it. He's like, no, let's fix this! Let's reconsider the attestation strategy of nodes. He points out this unfortunately shows that the analysis by Gacconst and at Vitamin Butters. Giorgio Constantopoulos and Vitamin Butters here was too optimistic when the article claimed reorg stability will improve in proof of stake over proof of work. We have not seen 7-block reorgs on Ethereum mainnet in years. He says you can find an analysis here that already discusses scenarios in which reorgs can happen. At this point, it is unclear whether the reorg we saw was caused by an attack or just unfortunate network conditions. And it almost doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters diagnostically, but if you suffer a reorg, it's bad, whether it was caused by an attack or unfortunate network conditions, because you don't really want either one after the merge when the entire Ethereum network is actually running on proof of stake. If you want to see one explanation of what happened here, go to this thread from Terrence.eth. Even Martin Koppelman suggests this thread in his original thread. But the funniest part of this explanation is that it only further fits our analogy. When someone is practicing driving in a parking lot before they've actually driven on the real roads, and they accidentally hit something, they accidentally hit like a light post or another car or something, they often tend to have the same kind of explanation. And that explanation is, it's always like, it was just terrible timing. The car pulled out right as I was turning, or a car was like blocking my view of the light post, and then the car moved. It was like a coincidence that the car moved at the exact same time as I was turning and I hit the light post, or the car just happened to pull out at exactly the same time. It was all a big coincidence. And Terrence.eth comes to the same conclusion here. He says, such an incident needed 0.25 to the 6 chances for it to happen. It was all a big coincidence. Bad luck or not, it turns out that running a truly decentralized proof of stake smart contract blockchain is probably a little bit trickier than a lot of ecosystems would like to acknowledge. We now have a replacement for DB Sync. It's coming to us from DC Spark. It's called CARP. What was DB Sync? What is CARP? Well, luckily, DC Spark has written a very nice article here explaining everything to us. They say, blockchains contain a lot of information, often hundreds of gigabytes worth of data. Applications like dApps and wallets need to quickly filter through this data to provide the fast user experience that users expect. This is what indexers are meant to solve. DB Sync and CARP are indexers. There are many different kinds of indexers, and the best one for the job tends to depend on what you're trying to do. SQL databases are a popular kind of indexer because they provide a lot of flexibility to users to query what they want while maintaining decent performance. So when you're using any of the dApps or wallets available in Cardano, they obviously have to look at whatever you're trying to do and then go reference data on the blockchain in order to get back to you and do whatever it is you're trying to do. And the most performant way to do that is not to actually go to the blockchain and look at the data directly, access that data directly on the blockchain. That wouldn't be a performant way to do that. Instead, what they do is they go to one of these databases maintained by one of these indexers, and they filter through the data in the database. True, if you're a blockchain purist, you're thinking to yourself, whoa, whoa, whoa. I thought we're looking at the data on the blockchain. Now we're talking about taking the data off the blockchain, putting it into a database and accessing it there. True, granted, we need to be confident that the data in the database is the same as the data on the blockchain. But this is one of those little trade-offs we make in order to have much faster, more performant dApps and wallets. We are making this little trade-off. We're not accessing the data directly on the blockchain. We're accessing the data as it's been indexed in one of these databases. So that's what CARP and DB Sync do. Now we have a replacement. DB Sync's been around for a while, and you've probably heard developers, make various complaints about DB Sync. As developers, of course they want the best possible tools, and that means you've got to upgrade tools over time. and CARP is a new replacement for DB Sync. They've also got this great logo here. This is a fantastic logo, except in my neck of the woods, the CARP definitely are not like largemouth bass. They don't have these giant mouths like largemouth bass. They have these like little mouths down here at the bottom because they kind of like just nibble on plants. They're not really this type of giant mouth type fish. They kind of have like the small mouth. But I will say the giant mouth version of a fantasy carp definitely makes a better logo than the actual shape of a carp's mouth. It looks like World Mobile's work in Zanzibar is continuing to accelerate. They say, as our rollout is accelerating, we're now advertising Airnodes to local entrepreneurs who'd like to earn an income by connecting their community. This is the power of the sharing economy. And down here in this video, you can see a gigantic, very cool billboard advertising Airnodes to local entrepreneurs. I think this is really important. It's I think it'd be easy as blockchains get into what Cardano has been calling RealFi, as we get into these RealFi applications of crypto, it would be really easy for blockchains and blockchain projects to make the mistake of sort of trying to operate in a bubble, sort of theoretically talking about RealFi and including real world customers, but not ever like making that real step of reaching out to real world customers in a way that makes sense to those customers. And in this case, I'm counting entrepreneurs as customers. They're sort of part of the ecosystem, the onboarding of them into the ecosystem. But it would be easy to just sort of like intellectualize all of this RealFi stuff and not actually figure out how to make that connection with real people who may not otherwise be interested in blockchains or otherwise have knowledge of blockchains. And I think World Mobile may be able to perform really well in this category. I think they are really thinking about actual human beings in the real world and how to connect with them. Finally, you know what day it is today. It's the last Thursday of the month. Today is Army of Spies Cardano Rumor Rundown, episode number 360. And today is also the May Cardano 360. This will be kind of interesting because this May Cardano 360, I believe, will actually be the last one, the very last one prior to the Vossel Hard Fork Combinator event, because the last Thursday of the month next month, I believe, is May 30th, which will be after the projected date for the Vossel Hard Fork Combinator event, as long as it's not pushed back. So this will be kind of interesting to watch this one prior to Vossel and then watch the next one, which will be happening right after Vossel. This will be kind of an interesting kind of contrast between the two. But I hope you are having a great week, and I will talk to you tomorrow.